Welcome to the conversation. My name is Carrie Ann, and I will be your host in this first segment of the show. With me today, I have the lovely Athena that we are borrowing for our Tomorrow's Science show. I also have a Mike, who is our rocket specialist, and I've got a Dada behind us who's going to be producing the show. I also have a Stoge, but don't tell anyone. Okay, so Athena, what do we have for today in news?
We have dark matter in the cosmic dawn.
That sounds awesome. Mike, what have you thrown at me?
Some International Space Station crew members are returning to Earth amid space station debates.
Oh, that's going to be cool. And then in our second segment, Jared will be back, actually. He's going to be conducting our interview today of Max Haot from Launcher Space. I had to look at my notes on that one. And then in our third segment, we're all going to be back in some sort of manner to talk about your questions and comments, concerns, complaints about our last week's show. But this is Tomorrow's Space, Orbit 11.09.
Good morning. How's everything up in the sky? Stand by.
All right, I want to make sure I give a huge welcome to all of our citizens, and particularly our escape velocity citizens at the top of the show. These people have contributed $10 or more per episode on Patreon, or $30 or more a month on makersupport.com. They get access to our exclusive citizen-only hangouts. They get read-only access to the host channel, which is kind of an awesome thing. Actually, in parentheses, it says future reward. So, I mean, they will be at some point, I guess. They also get voting rights on upcoming roundtable discussions and so much more. If you are interested in becoming a citizen of the show, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO or makersupport.com/TMRO. It's your choice. You do you, boo.
Yeah.
One of the other things that we also like to do at the top of the show is talk about any launches that may have come up since last show. So, Mike, this is when I turn to you and ask you about launches that happened the last week. What have you got?
Well, we had a couple launches this week, although the one that I was most looking forward to got rescheduled. But the first one that happened was on Tuesday, and that was a Japanese H-2A rocket, which launched a Japanese spy satellite into orbit, and it's going to be getting some really cool data from that. And it's part of their what they call their information gathering satellite program.
Nice.
This launch occurred on Tuesday, February 27th at 4:34 Coordinated Universal Time from the Nagashima Space Center. And it was flying the 202 configuration, which had two solid solid rocket boosters. And the H-2A can be used up to 4 solid rocket boosters for launches. Now, with this launch, JAXA and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, the H-2A's main contractor, did not provide any live video of the webcast because of the secretive nature of the launch. But news media and other spectators near the launch pad streamed the launch online, and announcements over loudspeakers at the Nagashima press site confirmed the separation of the payload in orbit. Now, the payload was the 6th optical satellite in the Information Gathering Satellite Program, otherwise known as IGS Optical 6, and it's reportedly capable of achieving a ground resolution exceeding 40 centimeters. And it's the 16th mission flown under the IGS program to provide Japan with independent access to reconnaissance data to assess potentially hostile activities in Japan's geopolitical neighborhood, like North Korea. Now, the Japanese surveillance fleet includes a mix of different optical and radar spy satellites, and the radar-equipped craft can peer through clouds and darkness to collect all-weather reconnaissance imagery. But here is a artist representation of what the IGS Optical 6 satellite looks like, and congratulations to JAXA and Mitsubishi for the successful launch, at least. So always cool to see these H-2A launches and the 2B launches go off.
Yeah, totally. I have kind of a weird question that you may or may not be able to answer.
Yeah.
It looked like while the rocket was still on the pad just before liftoff, that it was already some like yellowing on the outside. I don't know if like that was just me like seeing something weird, or if maybe that was part of like the heat shield, not the heat shield. What am I trying to say? What's the foam on the external tank of the space shuttle, like that turned orange? I didn't know if that was like maybe something along those lines, or if you even know what I'm referring to.
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. I do know that the color of the core stage tank is orange because it has similar types of insulation, like what you imagine on the space shuttle core tank. But as for any sort of coloration, okay. I think what that is there is just the solid rocket boosters, kind of doing almost like what we saw a couple of weeks ago with the Delta IV, how it kind of starts to like burn the sides a little bit. I think that was just the different reflection of light that we were at and the initial ignition of those solid rocket boosters.
Gotcha. Also, and the other thing I was going to comment on, I apologize, I'm totally hijacking this segment, but it's mine, so that's okay. It seemed as though there was also a count up, not just a count down.
I was going to say that too.
Right?
I noticed that, in Japanese.
That was actually from the distance because that was what we were hearing over the loudspeakers. So actually the count had counted down to 0 and said ignition, but we didn't actually hear the sound from the rocket itself until several seconds later. That's why I kind of let it play out for a little bit so that we could hear that roar just a little bit.
Totally.
Before I started talking.
See, this is why Mike is the rocket specialist, and I asked those questions. Okay, perfect. So there was at least another launch, right? So
yes.
This was the ULA launch, which I saw some really amazing pictures of, where you can actually see like the plume from the rocket lifting off, and then you can also see it kind of the kickover without it being a fisheye lens, and that picture was amazing. I wish I could give credit. I apologize. Saw it on Twitter somewhere. Go find it. It's really cool. But tell me more about the launch. Mike.
Yeah, lots of beautiful imagery out there of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket, which launched this Thursday. And that was launching the GOES-S weather satellite, the second in the next generation of weather satellites for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. And this was a pretty cool launch.
4, 3, 2, 1. And the liftoff of the Atlas V and NOAA's GOES-S, a highly sophisticated weather-watching eye in the sky, to join its twin in providing better forecasts and saving lives.
Now, this launch occurred on Thursday, March 1st at 22:02 Coordinated Universal Time from Space Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Now, the Atlas V was flying in the 514 configuration, which means that it had a 5-meter payload fairing, a single-engine Centaur upper stage, and 4 solid rocket boosters. The boosters and the core stage performed as planned, and the Centaur upper stage performed 3 engine burns with coast phases in between those burns to place the GOES-S weather satellite into a geostationary transfer orbit. Now, telemetry after the payload separated from the upper stage confirmed that GOES-S was in the correct transfer orbit with an apogee of about 35,289 kilometers and a perigee, or low point, of 8,200 kilometers, and was tilted at an angle of 9.5 degrees to the equator, which was a perfect pinpoint orbital insertion to where they wanted it to go. Now, GOES-S, and GOES stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite, it's going to be spending the next couple of months moving into its final orbital position using its own thrusters to get into a circular geostationary orbit. It's also going to be completing checkouts of all its instruments and finally entering service later this year. And when it does enter service, it'll be renamed GOES-17, providing weather coverage for the western United States and the surrounding areas, and joining with the first of the newest GOES satellites, GOES-R, which was launched in November of 2016 and is now in service as GOES-16. Now, the twin spacecraft, the first 2 of them of the GOES-R series, are carrying 6 instruments each that are going to collect a lot of different weather data in space and have much better imagers than in the past. And there's 2 more satellites in the GOES-R program, GOES-T and GOES-U, which are in assembly at Lockheed Martin's facilities in Denver, and they're replacing the previous fleet of GOES satellites, which were actually built by Boeing. And once the other two are launched, there should have enough coverage for the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, up until 2036. So very cool that this launch went off, and there's a whole lot more data and video and beautiful imagery that you guys can find online, but we just don't have the time for that right now.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially because I just keep asking you questions about it. No, that was really beautiful. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Love the GOES series. I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to point that out. Yeah. It was the first launch I've ever seen was the GOES
Oh, yeah?
R, actually. Yeah, last November. Or the
Nice.
November before that, yeah,
Great.
2016. But
Awesome.
yeah, it's super cool. Yeah,
That is really
sorry.
cool.
I'll let you segue.
No. Feel free. My segues are total crap. Mike is really the segue king. Speaking of segues, so Miss Athena,
Yes.
we are talking about dark matter.
Yes.
This is something I still cannot manage to wrap my head around. So I'm hoping you can, no pun intended, shed some light on it for me.
Totally.
Okay, good.
Definitely do that. So
What have you got?
dark matter usually has been detected through only its gravitational influence, but now astronomers have actually been able to detect it through a signal that was picked up from our early universe, showing that dark matter's effect on the temperature of the hydrogen gas clouds that actually existed during the formation of the very first stars in our universe. This is known as the cosmic dawn. So between about 400,000 years after the Big Bang to about 180 million years, the universe was thought to be filled with neutral hydrogen gas. It was super dark. All that there really was just the afterglow of the Big Bang. And this gas absorbed some of the microwaves from the cosmic microwave background radiation. And just at the end of, this was known as like the end of the cosmic dark ages, or known as the age of when the first stars really formed. Radio astronomy measurements were made with an array of 3 simple radio antennae in Australia and the outback called edges. And they did this by measuring the radio waves coming from all over the sky and looked for signals of our early universe. Some of the signals have been absorbed by the hydrogen gas, where it took place at microwave wavelengths, but because everything gets stretched out due to the expansion of the universe, these waves have stretched out and moved into the radio wavelengths. So these scientists were like searching the radio wavelengths, and they were looking for dips in these radio wave signals. So with the standard cosmological theory, you can predict just how much absorption of the microwaves actually occur, because that depends on the temperature of the gas. But the absorption scientists are observing is about 2.5 times greater than predicted. This suggests that the gas is a bit cooler than predicted too. Normally, they would think that the gas was predicted to be about 7 degrees above absolute zero, but it actually was about 5 above. So the gas is a lot cooler, and this observation shows that the gas had to have been giving off heat energy to something else in the universe. And the only other thing at that point in the universe that would have existed would have been dark matter, because it's the only thing that would start to form clumps, which would be the seeds for galaxies. So based on astrophysicist Renan Barkana at Tel Aviv University, the dark matter must be soaking up the extra energy and heat in the hydrogen gas in the universe. If this observation is to stand true with dark matter, then that means this would be the only other observation or measurement of dark matter other than its gravitational influence. Because up until now, scientists have only known dark matter, like I said, by its gravitational influence. And actually, a science writer, Adrian Cho, who I was listening to, it was a podcast that was talking about this subject, he said, and this is a quote, "This is a huge growth industry in cosmology and astronomy." And I totally agree with this, because if you think about it, you can trace this gas and watch as these gas clouds form into galaxies through the cosmic evolution, and you can eventually construct a map of how these galaxies will actually form. And you can then start to track the stages in which the gas clouds went from forming the first stars, and then the shape of the galaxies, and then the gravitational influence of the galaxies on the shape of the universe, and then see as we know it today. So this unexpected temperature tells us that the dark matter particles, whatever they really are, they have to be very, very light. They can't be heavier than hydrogen atoms themselves. And this is because when you have the collision of hydrogen atoms in the clouds intermixing with the dark matter particles, there's an exchange in energy and heat. So because in order for the hydrogen to cool, it has to be giving its heat and transferring it over to something else, which right now is theorized to be the dark matter particles. So if the dark matter particles were heavier than the hydrogen atoms, then you would get this effect of it just kind of like bouncing off. He actually compares this to if you take like a ping pong ball and you throw it at a bowling ball, it just totally bounces off. Where if you throw a ping pong ball at another ping pong ball, they actually have this exchange in energy, and they transfer the hydrogen heat up to the dark matter. So like I just said, so pretty much you have the dark matter particle and then you have the hydrogen atom, and they're colliding, and it's actually transferring and exchanging energy and heat. So I found this research to be extremely incredible, and I'm really excited to see what is going to come out of this with dark matter. So this is a huge breakthrough, just because, for decades, we've been studying dark matter and inklings of it, but it's only been gravitational measurements.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Although now all I can see is like a bunch of ping pong balls like coming at me.
I was trying to get like a video. I was going to shoot my own video of like throwing a ping pong ball, but I didn't want to get a bowling ball and possibly break anything.
That's kind of a lot. Yeah, no, I understand. I appreciate the effort though. Nonetheless, next time we'll just ping us, and then we'll hit like a ball pit or something, like a Chuck E. Cheese.
Those things still exist, right? Do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Go with Dave and Buster's, like the Chuck E. Cheese sprinkles. Yeah. Get like a basketball, just start throwing at each other.
I love it.
Dodgeball.
What are you doing? Science.
Science. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. All right, so Mr. Mike, you're going to tell us about some people and some international space stations and some earthy things.
Yeah.
That's the only segue I've got at the moment. So go ahead and hit me.
No good puns or nothing?
No, I know. I was working on it for you, and I gave Athena my best pun. I apologize.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, what I'm talking about is the Expedition 54 crew members, NASA astronauts Mark Vande Hei and then Joe Acaba of NASA, as well as Commander Alexander Masurkin of Roscosmos, have returned from the International Space Station in their Soyuz MS-06 spacecraft. And the trio landed on the steppes of Kazakhstan around 2:31 Coordinated Universal Time on Tuesday, February 27th. And that on-time touchdown closed out about 168-day and 5-hour mission since the launch from Baikonur Cosmodrome last September 12th. And during their 168 days in space, they were part of the first expedition that began a long-term increase in the crew size of the U.S. segment from 3 people to 4 people, because the Russians downgraded their side from 3 people to only 2 people. But anyway, that enabled NASA to double the time dedicated to research, surpassing 100 hours of research in 1 week.
That's awesome.
That's really awesome that they are able to do that, yeah. And looking forward to more stuff that we're going to be able to do in the future. But also during the cruise tour, Masurkin was involved in that record-breaking Russian EVA, and also there was all those major EVA tasks on the U.S. segment side over those series of EVAs that completed the replacement of the station's robotic hands, which I talked about quite a bit. And the crew also helped unload 4 visiting cargo ships, welcomed 3 new crew members aboard, and monitored the departure of 5 visiting vehicles. And once all the final farewells were complete and the hatches between the ISS and Soyuz were closed after undocking, Expedition 55 officially began with Anton Shkeplerov, NASA's Scott Tingle, and Norishige Kanai of JAXA, which is actually going to be the second Japanese commander of the space station ever. And they're going to be there by themselves until the next crew members arrive on March 23rd. Now, the Soyuz had a couple hours of free flight before it departed and landed, and you can see the crew members getting out right now. And with that landing, Masurkin's total time in space over the 2 space station flights stood at around 334 days, while Joe Acaba, who is a veteran of a space shuttle flight and 1 previous station visit, has logged 306 days in space, while this was Vande Hei's first mission in space, so all the time that he accumulated while he was up there. So very cool mission that they were able to have. And meanwhile, while all this was going on, the same day that the landing was happening, 2 senators who previously expressed opposition to the proposal to end NASA's funding to the International Space Station in 2025 sent letters to NASA and the White House asking for details about a really overdue ISS transition report. So in this February 27th statement, Senators Ted Cruz and Bill Nelson released letters that they had sent a week earlier to Robert Lightfoot, who's the acting administrator of NASA, as well as a guy named Mick Mulvaney, who's the director of the Office of Management and Budget at NASA. And what they were asking for was the status of a report on the future of the ISS that was mandated by the NASA Transition Authorization Act of 2017. And in that act, which was signed into law last year, that required NASA to develop a transition plan for the International Space Station for shifting its operations from the current regime to one where NASA could be one of many customers of a low Earth orbit non-governmental human spaceflight enterprise. So with that, they were looking for other possibilities as well, such as extending operations at the ISS in the current way that we're doing it from 2024 to 2028 and even beyond 2030. And that act required that NASA turn in that report by the beginning of December 2017. So here we are, it's now March of 2018, and Cruz and Nelson said that the language in the 2019 budget proposal seeking to end NASA's funding to the ISS in 2025, remained really concerning to them and has led them to seek the status of the transition plan and find out exactly what is going on and get, any rough drafts and any information that they possibly have for it. And one of the quotes that I wanted to talk about in this letter that they had is that they said that while we have strong proponents of the U.S. commercial space sector, prematurely ending direct U.S. government funding of the ISS could have disastrous consequences. The future of the International Space Station should be determined by the emergence of a viable and proven commercial alternative and the needs of our national space program. So I'm very encouraged by their support and the kind of fight that they are putting on already to the idea of canceling funding in 2025. And I'm really looking forward to what sort of support for commercial alternatives or even extensions to the ISS might come about, like Bigelow Aerospace or even Ixion, which is studying the idea of having the wet workshops, reusing a upper stage core stage, the fuel tank, and turning it into a habitation module, kind of like what we did with the Skylab program. So I'm really encouraged by this, and there's a lot more support. And with these people, especially Senator Cruz, since he's on the Science and Space Committee, they will not let things end without a fight. And hopefully we're going to see the ISS continue on for many years, since people from Boeing have been weighing in and giving lots of data about what the expected lifespan of the hardware is and when we would actually need to do a retirement. And I'm hoping that we can push things out as far as possible. So yeah, that's your ISS update for the week.
I love it. That's totally what we need. So Mike does launches, Mike does ISS updates. Like, we just need your own little corner, I think, right?
Rocket and human spaceflight stuff. Just send all that my way.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
You should have your own space station.
I know. Oh, yes. A hologram can go anywhere.
I want to have an orbital. I want to be an orbital garbage man and have a recycling station. I want to go up and wrangle as much space junk and defunct satellites as I can, and salvage as much hardware as possible, and cobble together some new stuff and deploy out some new satellites out of the stuff that I
You'd be like the guy on the beach with like a metal detector, except you'd be in space.
Yes.
Giant metal detector.
Maybe it'd be respectable. I don't know.
Right?
I don't know.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So then, Miss Athena, you're going to be closing out this segment with a bad day. This is a terrible headline.
I know, it sounds horrible, but it's actually kind of cool, but not. It's Proxima Centauri. So our sun's closest neighboring star, other than obviously like our own sun, it's the closest star to us. It had a stellar flare. So our sun has a lot of solar flares, which is just like a big burst of energy, an explosion of radiation. But this is the first time it's been observed of Proxima Centauri. So this led to astronomers actually researching the potentiality for life on the exoplanet Proxima b, which orbits Proxima Centauri. About 20 times closer than the Earth orbits the Sun, Proxima b orbits very closely to Proxima Centauri. And with this intense stellar flare that was recorded recently, it would have blasted Proxima b with about 4,000 times more radiation than what the Earth gets from a solar flare. So at peak luminosity, this flare was 10 times brighter than our sun's largest flares when observed at similar wavelengths. And Proxima Centauri's stellar type is known as an M dwarf, which are most common in our galaxy, yet they're not studied that often in these wavelengths that this was actually studied in. When this flare actually happened, it caused the brightness of Proxima Centauri to increase by about 1,000 times in only 10 seconds. What causes a stellar flare to happen are excited electrons in the star reaching acceleration rates close to or at the speed of light due to a shift in the magnetic field of the star itself. And then when these electrons interact with the plasma that makes up most of the star, it results in an eruption of stellar emission spanning the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So astrophysicists believe that due to Proxima B's closeness to Proxima Centauri, it's likely that it was blasted with so much high-energy radiation that if there was an atmosphere or any life at all, this blast would have totally evaporated either the atmosphere or oceans and would have sterilized the surface. So if this stellar flare is a common occurrence for Proxima Centauri, this may suggest that habitability would involve more than just being the right distance from the host star to have liquid water. Right now, actually, this is a region called the Goldilocks zone. Or also like the habitable zone, which is like a certain region that needs to be in orbit around its star for life to possibly exist. It also means that if this planet has any life forms, they would have to find a way to actually survive these harsh bursts of radiation. So I wonder, if this takes out the potential for Proxima B being an exoplanet with life. Oh yeah, this is a really pretty image of an aurora, also known as like the northern lights that we actually experience here on Earth, which is an interaction of the electromagnetic particles with Earth interacting with like a solar flare that actually comes from the sun. So it's super pretty, and
it is.
We probably don't experience that on Proxima B, because the solar flare was so intense.
Right.
But yeah, I think if they actually do find a way where life forms can exist through these really harsh conditions, that'd be crazy. That'd be dope. Like, that'd be really cool. But there's a high chance, too, that if there actually was any life similar to, like, what we would be on Proxima B, that it might have actually completely gotten, like, evaporated from this solar flare. So I know that's why I titled it Proxima B. Had a bad day.
Yeah, totally. Go ahead, Mike.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, and any of you in the chat room, if you know the answer to this. Didn't we just discover Proxima B just a couple of years ago? So we don't even know yet what its composition is and whether or not it has a strong magnetic field like Earth. I mean, even though it's being exposed to these solar flares or stellar flares that are 4,000 times stronger than what Earth is happening, if it has a strong enough magnetic field, I mean, there could be a chance, that trite saying, life finds a way, and maybe even there is life on there that's similar to something like tardigrades or something that don't need to worry about that type of radiation. Who knows?
I was just Googling tardigrades. Exactly. I was like, it's that water bear thing. What do we call it? Oh, tardigrades.
Yeah.
And for those of you watching Star Trek Discovery, no spoilers. That's really interesting. I had a very similar thought. Good point.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. We don't actually really know.
Rule it out yet.
Yes, yeah, word, exactly. So we don't actually really know as far as like the composition of Proxima B, of this exoplanet, and yeah, if it has like a super strong electromagnetic field, that would be great. Because then the auroras, like looking at that image again, like can't even imagine what they would look like on this planet. Totally. And then its little tardigrades might be super happy.
Is that a big differentiation between what we here on Earth call a solar flare versus what you were defining here as a stellar flare? Or are they kind of one and the same? It's just, it's not our sun, so we had to give it a different name.
Exactly, it's the name. It's just like saying solar system and planetary system. It's just that we keyed the name solar or the sun as our star. We don't just call it a star, we call it like our sun.
Right.
And so that's where we use the term solar flare as opposed to stellar flare, but it is essentially the same exact thing, just different terminology.
All right. Just want to make sure I didn't know if like one was like way bigger than the other.
Yeah,
like,
this one was really big, but but it's the same exact category.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. See, I learned something. You watched me learn. Which means I'm probably done for the day. In any case, what we're going to do now, Carrie Ann can only learn so much, man, and then it's otherwise it gets pushed out really quickly.
Not enough now, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a calendar break. You get to see all of the launches that Mike hopefully will be talking about next week on the show. And when we come back, Jared will be conducting an interview about launcher space with Max Haot. Stay with us. More tomorrow, coming right back.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation, this girl's a fascination. And nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving. Through the heat, keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
Hello and welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get started in our interview today, I just, of course, want to thank our citizens of tomorrow, specifically of our escape velocity variety. And, of course, how could we forget our orbital citizens as well. These folks gave us $5 or more per episode on Patreon, or $15 per month or more on Maker Support. And they give some really good goodies that if you actually go onto patreon.com/TMRO or makersupport.com/TMRO, you can find out what those goodies are, and you can help crowdfund the shows of tomorrow. So I am super excited today because I have got you, sir, Mr. Max Haot of Launcher Space today, which this is going to be a really fun interview because I've got a ton of questions, and of course we're going to talk with our chat room today as well about that. So welcome, of course, to.
Thanks for having me. I love the show, so
excellent.
It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to talk about Launcher with you, Jared.
Excellent. So right out the gate, Max, I kind of want to ask you. So what kind of is your background? Because you didn't really start in space, but you ended up moving into space. So kind of what's your background for the folks who may not
Yeah, my
know
background, the last 10 years, I started a company called Livestream, which is a live video platform. And more recently, towards the end, I actually founded a camera called Mevo, which is probably, I might be biased, the best live streaming camera there's out there. We made more than 100,000 of them, and gave me a lot of grounding in building teams of electrical and mechanical engineering, things I didn't know in the past. So yeah, I come from the video and internet industry, and now Livestream has actually found a new home with IAC Vimeo that acquired it last year, and have the chance to be able to do something new and something I've been dreaming to do. In a market which I think is getting, it's very difficult, but it's getting easier and easier. So that's how I got to space. So for me.
Excellent. So if you could tell us just a little bit about Launcher, and what you guys sort of like, what was the initial thing that kind of got Launcher going for you guys?
So at first, actually, when I started to decide to start my new career in aerospace, I was looking at doing a CubeSat startup. And the more I dug, I realized that launch, even though obviously we launched for small satellite, we at the time at Rocket Lab getting pretty close to hopefully reach orbit. I realized that launch was still not resolved, and there was still a big opportunity there. So what we are doing, we're building a relatively small orbital launch vehicle to deliver small satellite. But we have two Ps that are I think unique from all the competitors you might see out there. The first one is right out of the gate, we're proud of our 10-year timeline. So we have a 10-year timeline to be commercial. We've probably test flight 7 years, 8 years in, and we are about to have our first anniversary in a month or so. So we're nearly minus 9 years of that timeline. The second piece, because of that timeline, we have an approach which is engine first. You see a lot of these startups trying to build a team of 100 people and going at every subsystems you need to build a launch system. There's about at least 100 systems that you need to build with small team, from fairing, stage separation, guidance, obviously engines, and so on. And we think that it's a very risky approach. So because we have more time, because we have a thesis that the market is still going to be very exciting in 10 years, we are focusing exclusively on building the team and the engine, and everything else will come once we have not a demonstration engine, our flight-ready, lock-switch stage combustion, 22,000-pound engine, which we hope will be in 3 years. So we just started development of that engine. We developed our first development engine last year, and we have 3 years to finish the development of that engine with a team that will be less than 10 people, a range of partners, and we believe less than $10 million.
So what's the advantage? Because it sounds like you're taking sort of like an incremental approach to building your small launcher. What's the advantage of an incremental approach as opposed to sort of like some other companies that have kind of come in from all sides and attacked it that way?
Well, first let's take a step back, right? Only 11 countries have delivered anything to orbit. Before a month ago, only one VC-funded company had done it, which is SpaceX, obviously. And now we're super excited with Rocket Lab being the second one. Proving that it's a good thing to invest in launchers. SpaceX is not a one-off and not a fluke. So if you look at it, it's extremely hard, extremely rare. And the engine really defines a lot of, everything about your launch vehicle and so on. So if you have a really long view of the market, if you believe that it's not a winner takes all, and you're able to take a realistic timeline, then you can basically focus on your engine. Now, if you look at it, if we were a government contractor, 10 years to build from scratch a launcher, you actually get laughed at. That's extremely aggressive. Rocket Lab, if you think, we think that their engine, they kind of locked it down in about 2010 and first fired in 2013. It took them 8 years, and they're not yet commercial. They are, they reached orbit, but it probably will take them another year to be getting the cadence and being commercial. SpaceX, it took them 6 years to get Falcon 1, and then they scrapped it after 2 flights and focused on Falcon 9. It took nearly 10 years as well. So 10 years is by no means an easy timeline, and we think it's great because you can really align your engineering team and your investors. It acts as a great filter. Of course, it'd be great if we beat it. If we meet it, it'll be amazing. And that, that's a differentiator. And you see a lot of people out there saying they'll be orbital in a few years. And we'll see. We hope they succeed, because we certainly want as many companies and investors to succeed in this space, not to a lot of investors to lose their money, for example. So.
Yeah. So we've actually got some footage that you guys provided. Let's go ahead and take a look at that as it comes through, because this is just some incredible work that you guys are doing. So what are we looking at here?
So this is engine 1. So the company started in May. We had a team of 2. We're now 4 plus. Obviously, we have some partners for the new engine. We have an external consultant. And in less than 8 months, we developed a test site, a test stand, all the electronics. It can fire a pressure-fed engine of about up to 1,000 psi. And we've also mastered safely the use of liquid oxygen and kerosene. So this is our development engine. It's 3D printed in just 3 parts. It's very small. It's 500 pounds in thrust. I can tell you that if you come and visit us at the test site, we get scared sometimes. It's amazing. It's tiny, but you get very small. It still locks in RP1. So it generates 500 pounds of thrust. It has regen cooling, and it is 3D printed with an augmented spark igniter. So in less than a year, we built a team that was able to build all the systems in software, hardware, and obviously design and build in 3D printing an engine with our manufacturing partner. And we fired it successfully in December. Right now, we're finishing that test campaign. We're getting longer and longer runs. We obviously optimizing the performance, but this engine will not fly. It allowed us to start building the team, to learn about 3D printing. The cooling, for example, the cooling channels that you have, the kerosene actually flow through the body of the chamber to cool it, as in every orbital liquid engine. And that technology in mastering these tiny channels and 3D printing them, that applies, for example, directly into our flight engine, which is a 22,000 pound engine. So it's about 10 times smaller than a Merlin 1D of SpaceX, 4 times bigger than a Rocket Lab Rutherford, and 40 times bigger than this in terms of thrust.
Yes.
There.
So so you were talking about doing 3D printing for your engine. What's the advantage over traditional manufacturing methods to have 3D printing involved?
So I'll start with the disadvantage. The disadvantage is that you're limited in volume. There's no very big DMLS. It's powder bed, laser, 3D printing. You're limited in volume. The other disadvantage, you can only print in one metal. Actually, if you look at all of the orbital liquid flight engine, they typically have a liner in copper, which has great thermal conductivity to move all of the thermal energy into the coolant, which is in the wall. And then they have like a nickel alloy type bracing around. So these are the disadvantages. The advantage is that if you're building a traditional chamber, like SpaceX actually started with Merlin 1A with a carbon fiber ablative type chamber, which they quickly switched to a traditionally manufactured chamber. You basically have to, the tolerance in creating the liner and the outer shell, and then the brazing that you have to do to bring it all together is absolutely insane in terms of investment in jigs and infrastructure and expertise to build them. So, building a chamber traditionally of any size, you're talking about, tens of millions of dollars probably of investment right off the bat, and you can't call a chamber manufacturing shop and get one ordered. 3D printing, you can. There are many. We use EOS machine, the M290 and M400. It's a multi-billion-dollar German company, and you can either buy it or you can actually work with a number of vendors on the East Coast and the West Coast, and you can print your part. There are disadvantages. That's why Rocket Lab, had to stay within a form factor, especially in their technology, their design cycle, which was in the early 2010. And it's not as high performance given the lack of copper in the liner. But certainly, we were able to make an engine investing well under $1 million for everything. And traditional manufacturing wouldn't have been able to do it. And Musk did it with SpaceX, but let's not forget he started with $100 million. So he was able to invest in in all the expertise and the machines to make traditional chamber for Merlin.
So Manafsen in our chat room asked what technology you're using. So there you go, Manafsen. That's what they're using there.
Yeah, and it's Inconel 3D printed with spiraling channels in the chamber.
Excellent. So BEF in our chat room has a question for you, which they're wondering what your engine cycle is.
That's interesting. So our whole approach. So this year we did engine one, as you saw. We obviously raised capital. We built a test out, built a team, but we also defined our roadmap, which is our vehicle and obviously our flight engine, which I mentioned. And our approach is to go for the highest performance engine we can 3D print with our team, which is growing, in under 3 years for under 10 million. And we arrive at a 22,000 pound and LOX-rich stage combustion. Now, if you look at cycles, you have pressure fed, which is the simplest, but you can't get to orbit. You then have electric, which is actually an amazing hack that Rocket Lab was able to do. But there is it has a problem, is that you have to carry these batteries, and whether the batteries are 90% charged or 10% charged, they have the same mass. So actually, electric propulsion is electric. So a turbopump is easier, but it's lower performance, and they actually were able to dispense of the batteries on the second stage. Then you have open cycle, which is what SpaceX is using, and then on the higher performance end, which is actually what the Soviet era has mastered with the RD-180 and so on, it's stage combustion. So we believe we have the right team and the team members that are joining us this summer to attempt a stage combustion engine, which will bring us probably the highest performance you can build in a 3D printed engine. And you can see, BE4 and Raptor on are moving all to stage combustion. So the US is also moving to that type of cycle. So that's probably the riskiest part of our roadmap is this type of cycle. Which is famously known as the hardest to master.
Yes, and just to kind of reiterate, because one of our chat room people, CFIT, is asking, you're using turbopumps. So you guys are using turbopumps for yours?
No, so I mean, engine one is a 500-pound prototype for the reason I've mentioned. So engine two, we actually are most. Propulsion startup or launch vehicle startups start with the chamber. And actually, if you build a pump-fed engine, you should really start with the turbopump. And within the turbopump, you should start with a liquid oxygen pump. Our liquid oxygen pump has to go under 30,000 RPM, 30,000 rotation per minute. It has to discharge about 25 kilograms of liquid oxygen per second. These are extreme conditions, given that liquid oxygen can basically explode at any point in time if you have any friction. So we're starting with that. We've signed our partner contract to develop it and to test it. Our pump will be 3D printed, and we hope to have the flight-ready pump by mid-next year tested. So yes, it's a traditional turbo pump, one shaft, turbine, pre-burner, one liquid oxygen pump, two kerosene pump. And the pressure is nearly 5,000 psi. So this is not the chamber pressure. Chamber pressure is about 100 atmosphere, but the pump outlet pressure is about nearly 5,000 psi, which is a big part of the project to successfully build this engine.
Yeah. So Factor from our chat room is actually asking sort of about your 3D printing equipment, which is, are you working with other manufacturers for spin-off ideas to kind of help make something for a launcher on the side?
We want to pick our battles. I think there are some startups that are building their own 3D printers for tanks and other things. We want to rely on the billions of dollars of investment that what's being done by many of the leading companies. Right now, we think EOS is the right company. So right now we're using off the shelf, but there's actually a lot of craft in using these machines, especially for doing internal channels as we have, and we have a range of partners that we work with. Actually, for the E2 engine, we need a larger 3D printer that's available today. But because we're starting with the turbopump, we only need the chamber and the nozzle right at the end of our development process in about 2 years. So we have the bet, we're making the technical bet that that machine will be available by then. But we also are having discussion about customized machine. But fundamentally, it's the same machine. It's maybe a bigger form factor. But we'll see. That's for later. For 3D printing a turbopump, which some part will not be 3D printed, machines today available are, the technology is right there. Some parts will be traditionally manufactured. But we don't have to wait for a bigger machine. And, in your development process, I don't know if you heard B4 had a power pack failure and, right there. That's really the first step, and it's probably 70% of the difficulty of the engine is to have your power pack, which is basically your turbopump with some valve, running nominally without exploding, and you actually don't have a chamber and a nozzle. And once you get that running and you're satisfied, then you can move on to the full assembly, which is the chamber and the nozzle, for which we don't yet know how we're going to make it, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah, and to go back to our chat room, Factor is asking if you're finding newer or better designs using 3D printing, or are you guys kind of sticking with the tried and true methods of rocketry?
Let's look back at SpaceX. They did innovation with the Pintle injector with phase shut-off. But Falcon 1 and Falcon 9 is a traditionally manufactured launch vehicle. And then once they got there, right, they did the biggest probably innovation in the industry since the industry started, which is landing rocket and reusability. So we want to pick our battles and really start with the basics. And I think it's accepted that you can use 3D printing, and it's been proven now with Rocket Lab. 3D printed rocket engine have gone to space. And so in terms of design pattern, we don't think we have the capital or the risk to basically try to go down these roads. I think other people need to try that. So our liquid oxygen pump is traditionally designed, and we make 3D printing fit our requirement instead of invent a new 3D printer, a new design for a liquid oxygen pump to fit 3D printing. I wish we could, but I don't think it's reasonable from a risk point of view.
I kind of want to ask you about what it's like to be in an aerospace startup, because you guys are 1 year in to it, and that's kind of, for some aerospace groups, that's kind of infancy of what it's like. So what's it like being 1 year into the establishment of yourself?
What's amazing, I'll tell you, I remember being in my kitchen with my wife, and I've been dreaming about doing this forever, and things were changing with live stream, and suddenly I decided, I got the support of my wife, okay, let's do this, right? We had zero team, I knew nothing about it. I still don't, if you talk to me in 10 years, I'll tell you that at this interview I knew nothing about it. It's a journey of learning. And we went for it, and we didn't raise any capital. So what's been really amazing, so today we've obviously fired an engine, we built a team, we raised capital. I'm here talking to you about it, and we've defined our whole roadmap. And one of the most exciting thing is the amount of people that want to help you. You talk to 3D printing partner, you talk to people that make pumps, you talk to, everybody wants to work on this thing. And, some people you meet, they're like, oh, another rocket startup, facepalm, it's crazy, there's so many. But if you really look at the opportunity, maybe around the world there's 100 startups with on average 20 people working on it. There's like 2,000 people around the world working in, private VC-funded new launcher company. And if you look at the opportunity, we think it's so little. So, back to the experiment, if you look at the internet industry, you're fighting to get any engineers. You're trying to sell them your dream, our video platform. You are fighting against Google, Facebook, and so on to hire everybody. You now look in aerospace. That shocked me. We've never done any advertising. We don't have any job opening. We get 3 or 4 resumes a week that just show up, from experienced people to new graduate. And if you look at it, there are thousands and thousands of graduates of aerospace that are dreaming to get hands-on with building rocket engine and vehicles, and they all want to work at SpaceX, but SpaceX is hiring 3%, 4, 5%. So there's still all these other ones that are looking for home, and there's not that many startups. Back to my comment, you could think there's a lot, but there's not that many people doing what we're doing and that are hiring. So the most excitement, so back to your question, is the amount of support, and then the amount of talent that want to join. And it's more the limiting factor is our budget and our funding, not the amount of talent from experience to graduate that want to get hands-on with this.
Yeah, that's just, when you frame it like that, just the value of people coming together and really working towards a common goal. That's just a fantastic way of doing things.
I mean, and everyone that knocks on your door, they want to build a rocket, right? So, in startups, you have this dream, this idea, this app. You kind of have to convince people that, but there, one of the great things is also the culture and the desire is there, from before they send you the resume. And so that to me has given me more and more confidence that it's a matter of cash and it's a matter of the market. We have a thesis that maybe 10,000 kilos a year of CubeSat will be launched in 10 years. And that all the startups that are today, maybe only 5 will succeed and be around in 10 years just by the startup pipeline. Not everybody succeeds. And we think it's still wildly inappropriate the amount of capacity that will bring to deliver what's to come, which will be really all of these CubeSat startups are really from new generation of entrepreneurs that are coming out of college and being backed by investor. So this is all to come, and that's really why we're taking the long view to be there with the right product at the end of a reasonable timeline.
Yeah, and to kind of talk about that future a little bit, Lur in our chat room is wondering which part of the market are you building for? I guess sort of what's the payload mass that you're going to be launching to low Earth orbit?
So we have a paper rocket that's configured that use 4 of our E2 engine. That's a 22,000 on the first stage and 1 on the second stage. It can take 300 kilogram to low Earth orbit. About 100 kilogram to 1,000 kilometer orbit. So that's what we have today. The reality is that the final configuration of our vehicle will be done with the latest market information and when the engine is done in about 2.5 years. So we might end up with a smaller one or a bigger one. With the size of engine we have a lot of flexibility. Our goal is the CubeSat market, and we hope we can develop a big enough launch vehicle so that we can carry single units of the internet constellation. That's the sweet spot. I'm sure everybody here knows, but when I started Launcher a year ago, there was 20,000 proposed new internet constellation satellite to be launched in the next 5 years. Just since Sputnik, only 5,000 have ever been sent and 3,000 are operational. So that's an insane number. That's now grown to 30,000, I think. And obviously we've had Starlink, the first real evidence from SpaceX Starlink a week ago. If that's really true, if that will happen, and you look at the launch industry, the big launcher that we see every week, with Mike covering, the last 20 years has been 350 tons of payload every year, no growth. But if these internet constellation will happen, and I don't think 30,000 will happen, but if they will happen, this industry, the large launcher industry, has to go probably 5x. So if we can get some of these, most of them will deliver on Falcon 9 and Soyuz and Ariane in batch of 10 or 20. But if our launch vehicle can capture just a single unit of these, as well as the CubeSat, we will be in an amazing place. That's where we hope to be. But maybe the CubeSat will be enough. We will see.
Yeah, and kind of to sort of talk a little bit about ways to kind of lower cost of access to space. BEF in our chat room has a question: if you're planning on using reusability to lower costs, because I know a lot of small sat launchers aren't looking at reusability; they're just kind of expendable. So is that? And I know reusability is a really hot thing, right now with the actual flight-proven boosters being flown. So is that a thing that works for you guys, or is it kind of a little bit of a challenge?
There's a few challenges. First one is you have to walk before you run, and we're making sure that obviously all of the technical choice we make in the architecture could be used for reusability, from the gimbaling to the engine architecture. But the problem with small launcher is that the payload mass is a very small percentage of the entire vehicle. For us, under 1%, probably for Rocket Lab, under 1%. So if you look at a Falcon 9, which can take, 20 ton to low Earth orbit, most customers don't need the full load, and they have enough capacity to put, tons of fuel to come back. If you look at our vehicle, we have 300 kilogram and we have 30 tons of fuel. If you have a small payload, let's say 50 kilogram payload, that only gives us another 250 kilogram of fuel to do reusability. So there is a flow between reusability and small launch vehicle. There is a conflict. Maybe there's a sweet spot with slightly medium-sized small launcher that will be able to do it. We will see. But coming back to the market, people don't realize, but Rocket Lab, which is going to open the market, is about $60,000 a kilo. SpaceX is under $5,000 a kilo. So it's not about reducing the cost per kilo. If you are Planet and you're making a 3U CubeSat, you find that it costs $250,000 to send a CubeSat. You don't need it to cost $200 or $2,500. It'd be great if it was cheaper, but what you really need is the ability to send them when you want in custom orbits and in batch. And right now, the only way to do that is to buy a $60 million, the cheapest, before Rocket Lab existed, the cheapest launch vehicle is $60 million, which is Falcon 9. And a startup like Planet or the smaller versions of that, they can't buy that. Now, with $5 million with Rocket Lab, they could basically launch, tens of them and actually fund the 5 million launch. So it's really not about the price per kilo at this point. It's about the price for the whole launch vehicle. And reusability is not a factor yet, but it will be. I have no doubt that if we're going to be a 30-year launch vehicle timeline, we hope to be 100 years, whatever, we're building a long-term company, there is no way we will be around if we don't crack reusability at some point, that's for sure.
So right now the small sat launcher market's kind of in that launch on demand kind of area.
Piggyback, you
at
mean,
the moment.
right share.
Gotcha.
Yeah, right now, if you look at it, 2 years ago, only 100 CubeSat went to orbit. And that's because of launch capacity. Last year, thanks to PSLV of the Indian Space Agency, in February, they sent about 100 at the same time, or more than 100. 300 went up. We'll see this year and the year after, but I think that number, as I mentioned, can easily get to 10,000 kilo within 10 years. Just by the fact that VCs are getting involved, that you can now start a satellite company with $10 million, you can launch a demo constellation. Before, $100 million to launch, $200 million to build your satellite, and that's just for one. So unless you were a multi-billion-dollar media company or a government agency, you were not launching satellites. So the full effect of VCs, that obviously there's a huge VC network that has created Silicon Valley and tech as we know it, can now have departments, that they call frontier tech, and they can invest in launcher companies or CubeSat company. That full ripple effect, which also create entrepreneurs thinking about what they could do with this platform, we've yet to see, the result of that. And Rocket Lab getting to orbit is a key milestone to make it possible to launch and to forecast at a given price.
So to kind of take a comment from Tawikid in our chat room and to kind of paraphrase it, which is that there are a lot of small sat companies that are coming out, and it kind of almost reminds a lot of people of the internet in its infancy, where you had a ton of companies and then a really big bubble developed and it popped, and a lot of companies didn't end up surviving that. So what's the edge that you guys have that would help you survive something like that?
Oh, you mean a lot of launcher companies versus satellite companies?
Yes. Yeah.
The bubble is really a question of the demand in the market, right? In terms of will there be satellite companies and will Rocket Lab and others fulfill completely that demand? We have the long view. It could be a bubble. We're not sure. But we're certainly betting that it's not, and that a lot more application can come out of low Earth orbit. Just think about, let's talk about Starlink again. Imagine that this constellation is up. If you launch a CubeSat right now, you can have 9.6 kilobit of internet connection with Globalstar. That's like the speed of a 1990s modem. Or you can beam back to ground station and broadcast, your image and so on. It's very proprietary, it's very expensive, and so connectivity back from this CubeSat is still a big problem. Now, fast forward 5 years when Starlink is there, you can put a little module and you have gigabit internet connectivity always on, because you're communicating with these SpaceX or OneWeb or who else, satellite that are just above you. So now you have launch resolved, and you have obviously the miniaturization of satellite, which has already happened, and you have connectivity there. Maybe we'll see storage in the cloud. Maybe we'll see compute. maybe we'll see a live streaming from satellites. So I think the double effect between the miniaturization and the connectivity being resolved, with launch being resolved, I think we don't believe it's a bubble, we're bullish. But there will always be, at the end, the last 20 years of the industry, other than SpaceX arriving, SpaceX actually didn't grow the satellite market. It took dollars away from some people or payload from some people and sold it for less. So maybe even from as a market, a dollar point of view, it's a smaller market than it was thanks to SpaceX. Now, next 20 years, we see we're in 95. Maybe there'll be a bubble on the way. But it's certainly, the start of a new platform. That's certainly our view. Some people will tell you it's going to be the same, and all these little small launcher startup will die, and But there's always that view. But we'll see.
Yeah. And Madison in our chat room is asking, what kind of roadmap do you guys envision? So how's the future looking?
So as I mentioned, you have the next 3 years. So last year we achieved all of our objectives with Engine 1. Funding, team building, and so on. Next 3 years, we're building our engine. So that's the roadmap, that's the engine I mentioned. And we're not building a demonstration article. We have to get to a flight capable engine, maybe not fully qualified, but nearly. Then we'll need some substantial fundraising. I think in terms of the funding we already have today and the partners, getting the engine done, we think we've got that covered. But then, growing and building the launch vehicle, that will take probably about $100 million. We only will get that type of funding if A, we build an amazing engine with an amazing team, and B, our prediction that Rocket Lab didn't take the whole market, right, or that it's a bubble was right, and there's still a backlog, and there are still VCs wanting to get involved at lower valuations. So if we succeed at that funding event, which will be in 3 years, then we'll grow to 100 people, and we'll have to get all out building a launch vehicle by 2026.
And to kind of go to our chat room again, to kind of combine two questions. Madison has the question of where your company is located, and then CFIT also is asking if you have a proposed launch site for your vehicle as well.
So the way we look at, so we're located in New York, in Brooklyn, for our design office at an incubator called New Lab, and we have a test site at a North Grumman facility on Long Island. What's really interesting is New York is there's a few amazing company, for example, Marotta, that supply all the valves to SpaceX that are around. There's some company in Connecticut, but right now the aerospace industry is nothing like around here. But back in the Apollo program, this was the center of it all. The LEM was made on Long Island. So we think it's a great edge because there's a lot of engineers that want to be in New York around their family, and they don't necessarily want to go to here in LA. That's where we're located and growing. So I forgot the second part of the question.
The second one was about a proposed launch site.
Yeah, so the same way we think about, you see a lot of startups doing pre-booking and signing deals with satellite. At the end, launch delivery is a matrix of availability and reliability, but it's a market. Of course, there's 2-3 year notice for integration and so on, but if you have an orbital launch vehicle, you don't need to sign customers now. They will come, if you price at the right price. The same goes with launch site. We probably need, 3 or 4 years before we launch. We need to start securing a lease and building the facility. I hope it will be Kennedy Space Center. It might be Vandenberg. It might be Wallops. Ultimately, it's any launch site that the FAA and the U.S. government will give us access with KSC being the ideal one. That's probably a problem for 4 years from now for us.
I just want to say it's really cool that there's literally a launch company in Brooklyn, New York. That is like super cool. That is like the last place I would think of where I would have ended up figuring out where a launch company would come from.
If we did it in Long Beach, we would be competing with everybody else, and there we are. There's a great heritage, and literally 1 out of 5 resume is either an experienced or a graduate engineer saying, "I want to be in New York," and well, you might be small, but you're the only company building rocket engines. Yeah. So ultimately, we're there because I'm there with my family, and we started there, and we considered moving to Mojave and so on. And we were like, if we can find a test site, maybe it's not a crazy idea. A year forward, we think it's great. There's a lot of capital there, a lot of press. We differentiated for the recruitment, and we have found a great test site partner. And local administration love it because they want. There's all this agenda of bringing aerospace back to Long Island and New York, and we're part of it. We're small, but maybe we won't be small in 10 years.
So for Launcher itself, what is probably the biggest challenge for you guys that you see in your future, and how are you guys going to step up to that challenge?
Fundraising. And fundraising is a function of our market prediction. You know, a year ago, if we started with zero, right, and then we raised $1 million and so on. If we had started day one and let's say we had 10 million, I didn't have enough of a team, of an idea of the roadmap, of the how to do it, that we would have known how to do it. A year forward, yeah, we know exactly how we need to go about building this engine, and now it's a function of cash, and the same will apply to the launch vehicle. So it's at the end it will be cash, and we have a timeline that I think is reasonable. So we neither are trying to accomplish something that no one has ever done by doing it in 2 years.
If someone wants to learn more about Launcher, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, we have an amazing website with no information at launcherspace.com, but it has 3 links that are really important: the Twitter, the Instagram, and the email. So if anyone is interested in positions, they can just send us an email, and we post as much as we can on Twitter and Instagram. So that's kind of the blog of what we're doing. It's pretty clear. Yeah,
it's really cool because you're giving people really like a good insight into what goes into starting up a launch company.
Yeah, we're not afraid. We had The Verge coming over and for a test fire very early on, and we actually had an anomaly, and we had an explosion, and it was great because we're willing to show the development process. We're not pretending we're going to orbit next year, and every rocket development company has an anomaly, and so yeah, we're more than open. We haven't posted that video yet, but we will. So
excellent. So Max, we have sort of a series of closing questions that we ask all of our guests that come on the show. No right or wrong answers. Just however you feel, whatever answer comes to mind, we'll take it. So the first of those 4 is, which rocket of these 3 do you think is going to fly first? Do you think NASA's Space Launch System will fly first? Do you think SpaceX's Big Falcon rocket will fly first? Or will Blue Origin's New Armstrong fly first?
I mean, I'm rooting for Blue Origin and SpaceX. I think it will be BFR. But, Blue Origin, after more than 10 years of not achieving any orbital flight, I think more because of the detour they took. I think they have an amazing team and capabilities. So to some extent, I hope it's Blue Origin, because that will get, a second SpaceX competitor to be orbital, and it's been a long time in the making. And but probably I would bet on BFR. But there's not a lot of information of how far along they are. So, but one can trust that hopefully they're closer than we think.
Also, our second question: human or robot exploration of the cosmos?
Human, and I'm always torn between the idea. When people left Europe to explore America, I think 90% would die on every voyage. And so there's this concept, you guys speak about it sometime, but yeah, it should be human, and maybe we should take a little bit more risk. I don't know, but that's what I hope it should be.
And our third question: where should we go next?
Mars, for sure.
Mars? Any particular reason why Mars over other places?
I mean, why we'll have color picture of the moon instead of black and white. Like, what's the, we are explorers, the human race. I can't get excited over the moon. I'm sure I'll be excited that day. And let's have Mars. Let's have Mars be what we fund. And if we have to make a little pit stop on the moon, that's fine. But to fool ourselves and fully fund the moon and really no budget for Mars, I can't get excited about that.
And our final question, and my personal favorite question to ask anyone, period, is why space?
Why space? I think it's the most important, gift to future generation. I think the space exploration might be the only reason our race survived over a 10,000-year timeline, and being able to contribute any, however little this contribution will be, whether actually you contribute in media, which you guys do amazingly, and historically media has always fed the exploration cycle, or we contribute in failing or in succeeding. I just wanted to, use the rest of my career to make that contribution. We'll see what it is, but any little contribution to make it more popular, to advance the technology for eventual exploration is I think, very important.
All right. Well, thank you, Max Haot from Launcher, coming on today. Thank you so much for stopping by tomorrow, and we're really looking forward to what you're going to do in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Great to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Excellent. All right. So after this break, we will come back and we will have your comments from last week's show. So stay tuned. There's more tomorrow in just a little bit.
Science. It both draws us together and tears us apart, brings discoveries to cure us and threaten us. It is neither good nor evil. It is what we decide to make of it. There is so much more to learn, and we are curious. Together, let's explore the science of tomorrow.
And we're back. Now, before we head into the comments, of course, we have to give a... I'm sorry. I'm good. All right, let's do...
Verklempt.
Let's redo that since my throat decided to stop working. And we're back. Now, before we head...
Sorry, one more time.
Okay, sounds good. And we're back. Now, before we head into your comments from last week's show, we first want to give a huge shout out, of course, to our citizens of tomorrow, our escape velocity citizens. They contribute $10 per episode or more on Patreon, or $30 or more per month on Maker support. In addition, we have our orbital citizens who do $5 per episode or more on Patreon, or $15 per more on Maker support. And we can't forget these folks right here, our suborbital citizens as well. And boy, this is getting long, and I like the fact that there's so many names getting on here now. They contribute $2.50 an episode on Patreon, or $5 a month on Maker support. And of course, you can head on over to patreon.com/TMRO or makersupport.com/TMRO in order to see what kind of goodies you get at the certain levels that we have for you on Patreon or Maker support. So thank you so much for you guys helping us out to make these shows. I mean, really, when we say these shows are not possible without the help and support of our viewers, we're not joking around about that. You guys really do make this absolutely possible, and I love every single one of you who do. So thank you guys so much. It's great that we can do this. So we got some comments to talk about. Y'all want to do some comments?
Absolutely.
Yes.
You good?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I realized I didn't
what
actually.
was last week about?
So last
Right.
week, right. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mike. Last week, Jared also had an amazing interview
Yes.
with one Alan Stern, exploring Pluto with New Horizons, Orbit
so cool.
11.08. And I realized that I didn't actually read any of these comments before getting to air, so this is going to be fun. Yay! So much fun. Because I did not pick them this week. In any case, the first comment comes off of YouTube from Jamie Godman. It says, Alan Stern is freaking awesome. I love his enthusiasm for both robotic and human space exploration. The New Horizons mission was by far the most exciting done by NASA since MSL, Mars
Science Laboratory.
Thank you.
Curiosity.
Landed on Mars. Looking forward to New Year's so we can live it all over again. Stern is right. We really do live in the most exciting times for space exploration.
Mic drop.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny though, because I feel like there's, whenever I tell anybody about Tomorrow Space, for instance, I always say, we have it's Tomorrow Space, it's about space, with an emphasis on human spaceflight. And every once in a great while, I get sort of like a nasty sort of look of like, oh, human spaceflight.
What?
Only humans, huh? Not robots? No, we're not going to talk about that at all.
No
I'm like,
love for
no,
the
no, no, no,
robots.
no. I mean, like, we talk about
cover
other
all
things.
of it.
Like, it's fine. We do.
So defensive. Are they a robot? Maybe
We
they're
do,
a robot.
but like, you know, but I think it's funny how like there's a sort of exploration space as opposed to like more just only planetary space. But you know, we always want to go to the planets and explore that way. But then there's like this weird division between humans and robots and.
There's always exploration of space happening.
Yeah.
Irregardless of whether you're like actually going to somewhere, like a destination to explore space, or you're doing like we currently have at the International Space Station, which is that you're sort of more exploring the human aspect of how humans contend with space. And some of the other things too, like additive manufacturing in space and things that are happening on the space station right now. So, you know, there's always exploration happening, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen at the place either. I mean, we do pretty good with ground-based telescopes here on Earth as well, and our space telescopes as well. So there is always exploration happening, irregardless of whether it's people or robots going out and doing it, and that's exciting.
And plus, most of it's like a collaboration between the robots and the people anyway.
Absolutely.
So it's just like,
yeah,
you know.
the robots cannot operate without the people telling them what to do.
Word.
And likewise, we're going to need help from robots when we go out as people as well. I mean, even on the space station, you know, there's a robotic arm on there for it. So I mean, it's just everything kind of works together.
Yeah.
And it works when both work together at the same time.
That Canadarm is so difficult. I did a VR once trying to like actually dock it, and it was so bad. But they have one of like you being on the ISS is pretty cool. Talk about collaboration of robots and humans.
Yeah, I want to say, if you're ever interested in a visualization of trigonometry, the Canadarm is a great thing for that. So.
All right. Next comment. Right, mic drop on that. Next comment comes off of YouTube from Sean Hutchins. Says, could New Horizons reach Planet 9 and X, or 10, with its current trajectory, assuming they really are out there? Because it would be amazing to have a probe on the way to a planet before we even knew it existed.
Well, to kind of piggyback a little bit on that, the target that New Horizons is going to be flying by on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, depending on where you are on the Earth, which is 2014 MU69, which hopefully will get a nicer name soon.
We name them after we see them. It's kind of like sometimes you can't name a child until you see it.
Until you see it.
Exactly.
Like, I wanted to call him Abraham,
look at
but
this
you know,
little
eventually
one.
was like, no, you're a Johnny. Sorry, that's just the way that goes.
Look at this little, I'm going to call you 2018 VX47.
Hey.
So,
You never know. Go on.
2014 MU69 was not discovered before New Horizons was outbound. It was discovered in, you guessed it, 2014.
Oh.
So, and they actually,
would have
I love the simplicity.
they did a survey to try to find Kuiper Belt objects in that region, and they didn't find any with ground-based telescopes. It literally took Hubble in order for them to find those. They found two, by the way, that were along the trajectory. It's just that 2014 MU69 used less fuel to get to it, which means they could do it. Which means that they could burn, but then they'll have more fuel for a more precise flyby of it, and that's why specifically 2014 MU69 was chosen. But as in regards to Planet 9, I think Alan Stern would make a very strong argument that New Horizons already did fly by Planet 9. It was called Pluto, and I am inclined to agree with him too.
Me too.
And as far as anything else beyond that these days, they're still looking for the hypothetical Planet 9. So
Go ahead, Mike. What's up?
go ahead, Mike.
Exactly. We don't know whether or not this additional planet, whatever size it might be, does even exist. But you know, the whole gravitational disturbances and whatnot, you know, is the reason why we think it was out there. And looking for whatever object that might be is how we discovered Pluto in the first place, and lots of these other objects. And Mike Brown, a leading astronomer who was one of the discoverers of several of these other dwarf planets like Eris and Makemake and Haumea, has been collaborating with I forget what his name is. You might know, Jared. He's a Russian astronomer.
Yes, Konstantin
and their papers that
Batkian. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Konstantin
Thank you.
Bakian. He's a heck of a guitar player too. So.
Yeah, even if you go and look at their paper and see where their estimations of where this object might be isn't in the same trajectory as New Horizons anyway. So let's assume for a minute that this planet even does exist. New Horizons probably would only be able to take like, you know, some long distance pictures, like with the calibration pictures that we saw, you know, when it was first taking photos of Pluto.
Yeah.
So,
actually, if you're
not even close to it.
If you're interested in where this hypothetical planet may actually be at in our solar system, it's out of the ecliptic, or the plane of the solar system. It's actually very close to the constellation Orion. So if you could look up and see Orion at night, maybe take some pictures and you could help us find it. I don't know. Yeah. It's very difficult. They've been doing this for, I guess, 2 years now, and they've still got nothing. But that's the thing about specifically astronomy, is that you have to wait for the sun to get out of the way in order for you to actually look at it. And you only get a couple months per year of good observation of a specific area in the sky because of the glare from the sun. So it's both like, I haven't found anything yet, but it's also like, well, you know, that's the actual process of how astronomy works, is that it really is, these studies do take multiple years, not necessarily because, you know, we're clueless for years, but because our observation periods are just actually really tiny. Because the sun, I really like the sun, I appreciate it, but dang it, it makes astronomy hard.
It does.
So.
And all of us nocturnal.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell kids that if you really like staying up at night, become an astronomer, because then you'll get paid for it, and you can rub that in the face of your parents when you get older. So.
Yeah. Word to that.
That's hilarious. All right, the next comment comes off of YouTube from one Thomas M. It says, awesome interview. People like Dr. Alan Stern are making the Star Trek future we've all been waiting for a reality. Missions like New Horizon is what will help young people go into the STEM fields, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm going to throw A in there with art. With more young people going into science and technology, there will be even more awesome futuristic technologies with space missions. We are living in a renaissance of space and technology, and it is an awesome time to be alive.
I love that comment.
Agreed.
That is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I was like, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
You can tell I didn't pick these because I was like, let's go for something controversial. This was like, yeah, no, we all agree with that. Go ahead, Athena. I don't mean to cut you off.
I mean, it's literally like, you know, it really defends what we're actually here for, and this is why we're doing it. That's why we care so much about this stuff. And I like that you added in that extra A for STEAM, just because, like, that is a huge impact in just. Yeah, like he's even said, like trying to get the newest generations up and running and getting into this stuff. And it comes from missions like these that really starts to push the youth into saying, oh, I want to do something with this. And I also love that there's so many schools that talk about this too, and they actually will cover a lot of these missions. And I think that that's so great. I actually, after last week's show, I saw on Twitter a whole bunch of comments back towards when we were talking about trying to find schools that do more outreach, and there's so many more programs that actually exist now, which is pretty exciting, where they will team up with schools for missions like this to actually like observe maybe like a launch of it, or actually observe some like collected data. I mean, one of my favorite things actually is like NASA Eyes software that you can download on your computer, and you can literally track like any of the missions that are currently, any of the satellites or the rovers, and you can watch like live data. It's all like CGI and it's graphics. Sure. But it's so cool, and it makes it really, really fun. And if you just play like Mozart in the background and you play with it, it makes for a really nice afternoon. And there's a lot of these programs for kids, which I think is amazing. So I definitely, like I said, agree with this comment, but I think that's great because we are doing that with missions. We're teaming it up with students and STEM programs, STEAM programs. So, yeah.
Totally. And honestly, if it wasn't for the A in STEAM, we wouldn't get super awesome shirts like Mike's got on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's be fair.
Seriously.
I mean,
it's amazing.
it's me outer space. So,
Me outer space.
Have you guys seen the artwork that's on the Dove CubeSats that they add on every single one of those?
No.
I didn't even know they did that.
Tribal tattoo inspired art.
Yeah.
That's formerly Planet Labs, right? That does the Dove spacecraft.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I get them mixed up time with the other time.
I know, right?
But
Cool.
anyway, yeah. They have artwork that's printed on the underneath like the solar panels on every single one of their Dove Cube sets. Cool. Yeah, and it's really cool. You should just go through maybe an After Dark or something. And
that looks cool.
Yeah, I think we all know what our next tattoo is going to be.
Yes. I love like there's one of like it's like a cyborg dove. That's pretty dope. It's a dove and it has like it's like half robot. It's so cool. These are great. These are amazing.
They get it. They get it. Theme artwork too.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. All right. Last comment we've got up is from Jared Leggett off of YouTube. Says I used to do public outreach talks for K-12 schools in West Virginia, I'm assuming is WV, between 2013 and 2015. It was not a rare thing for students and some of the teachers to think that NASA had been closed down and not know about the NASA Independent Verification and Validation Program in Fairmont, West Virginia. The people who lived in those counties or adjacent counties would know or were more likely to know, but the next county over that they may have not even heard of the facility. Whew, like I said, did not read these before going on air. There's clearly an outreach issue, particularly in rural areas. Yeah, I think that's just sort of across the board, which is it's funny because here in America, NASA TV and access to information that NASA has is super easy. It's pretty well known, I think. It's what helped Space Vidcast kind of get on the map to a certain extent. We just got a really big satellite and put it outside and pointed it at the bird and got NASA TV. Like, really easy to do, other than like trying to source that forsaken satellite. But other than that, and having somewhere to put it, again, thank you, CAF. I think it's always interesting to me. I think if as long as you have some sort of interest, you should be able to find it. And again, this is only speaking for the U.S. It's really easy in the U.S. and it does always surprise me when anybody is like, "What? No, I mean they stopped running the shuttle, so therefore the entire NASA program is shut down." Like I don't even know why they're getting money. Like what are they doing anymore? And you kind of sit there and go, "Are you Falcon serious right now? Like I don't even understand. What is happening?" Oh my gosh. I know, Mike, you've run into some things like that as well.
Yeah, but I like, though, that now that at least even after the shuttle program has retired, yeah, I hear that comment all the time, but at least people have, like, heard of, like, the Curiosity rover and New Horizons, like, oh, we got those awesome pictures from Pluto, so I guess NASA is doing stuff.
Yes.
And there's a lot of times where that'll start conversations, like, I thought NASA was over, but yet we're doing stuff on Mars, and we took those pictures of Pluto. Like, what else are we doing? And, if they'll listen, that just opens up the whole can of worms of just like, oh, NASA's doing this and doing this and doing this, and we're collaborated with all of our international partners to develop new engine technologies and new different ways of surviving in space and pushing the boundaries and all of it.
Yeah.
So I like that a lot of these things are starting to be a little bit more publicized, and of course with like Falcon Heavy and that's getting more and more. But what this comment is more addressing is on the local level, those type of outreach things are really, really hard to find. It's out there, and if you look, then you can find it, but I don't know. And I don't know exactly what the solution is for it either.
I feel like a really good solution for that is for us to just kind of start talking about it in casual conversation.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I mean, I talk about space on Twitter and Facebook a lot, so people tend to come to me for just a little bit and ask questions and things like that. But there's other ways that you can do it too. You can become like an official person. Like I just joined the Jet Propulsion Laboratory Solar System Ambassador Program.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. But that's something that you can actually join, and you can go out on behalf of these groups and actually go talk about that to people who want to do that. But there's other ways to do that too. Like if you want to get in astronomy, the Sidewalk astronomers who are based out of San Francisco, they have a tremendous network throughout the United States where you can actually, if you got a telescope, you can contact them and they will send you places to go with your telescope to allow the general public to just kind of look through it. So, there's lots of ways that even if you're not a space geek or in the industry, you can actually contribute to helping get the word out about what's happening right now. Because one of the things that I do hear a lot of up at Griffith, like in my top 5 questions that I get from people besides like, if we throw where are the bathrooms at, out, one of them is, oh, NASA's still a thing? I thought they were closed down, so that's not necessarily something that's just a particular rural area kind of misunderstanding. Even here in Los Angeles, what you would expect, people who are in the know and everything.
Even Max was like, we didn't want to be in Long Beach because we'd be competing with everybody.
Yes. Even here, even here, which may be discouraging for a small sat company to join because of the level of experience in the area. Even here, there's people that don't know.
In New York, I used to get that a lot when I was working at the Space Shuttle Enterprise, and that was at the Intrepid. So many people really thought that NASA wasn't happening anymore. And for me, what I feel like what the solution is trying to intermix with every single type of person you possibly can, because there is a big it's like. The world really does work a lot like high school, where everyone kind of stays in their own groups. And there are intermixing, which is great. And it happens a lot, especially in big cities like LA and New York. But for me, anywhere I am, I talk about space. If I'm in an Uber, I talk about space. If I'm in a bar, I talk about space. It just happens. It literally does. And with most random people that aren't even in the industry and have no idea about this stuff. And so I made it a mission before I even thought I would be living here today. About a year ago when I was in New York, I was like, I'm going to try and find every single thing that happens in New York that's somehow space or science related I can go to that's literally free and just fun AF, literally just go and do stuff. And it's all sciencey, but it's cool and it's fun. I mean, there's so many different things, and I've literally made Facebook groups and just added all my random friends that know nothing about space. If they're and I have an abundance of friends in so many different communities, and they're just yeah, you know what, I'll go with you and do this. And then they have no idea about, like you were saying, these missions going to Mars. And I think that that's something that it's not just the coolness factor, but the bigger picture factor of tying us all together and how we're all intermixed as a species. And I think, just the main thing is trying to get to everybody else who's not just also, the only way, like you were saying, for people to know about this is they go to the Griffith Observatory and then they hear you talk about it. But if they decide that day, I'm not going to go to Griffith Observatory, or they maybe don't know even about Griffith Observatory, which would be weird, they would end up going maybe to some other park. They'll have no idea unless there's I don't know, someone who happens to be sitting there and talking about space shuttles, which would likely be one of us, or rockets or something. Yeah. So I think it's just that the vocabulary hasn't been adapted as much in social environments than everything else, like Instagram and, who's on this reality show or something, But we should have a reality show about rockets and us. Okay, no, anyway, I'm done. This is the reality show.
I feel like we do.
Well, we do. This is true. Wait, we do. Right.
At least a peek. This is at least a peek.
We're on a show right now.
That'd be so cool, though. Actually, a challenge of all these different startups and stuff like that. That'd be so cool to be following, all the startups that we've interviewed, within the past year, to follow all their progress and have weekly updates. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be amazing.
Yeah, I feel like there's a certain level that for a lot of people, space just seems completely intangible. It's not something that I can ever experience because it's simply for people who know significantly more than I do. And having worked in the industry, I can say that's not true.
That's totally not true.
But it's just one of those things where I feel like once you show people stuff, they definitely do get hooked on it. It is, I guess, how would I describe it? Communicable excitement. It's possible, and we should spread it everywhere we can.
Yes.
So,
totally agreed.
Anyways.
We're all doing a dramatic stare at the camera.
Just the weird stuff that goes inside my head. For anyone who's seen the IT crowd, look up friend face. In any case, I think that's the end of this segment. But before we go, I want to make sure I give a shout out to those of the ground support citizens. These people have contributed $1 or more per episode on Patreon, or $1 per month or more on makersupport.com. They, of course, also get their name in the show because that is the very least that we can do, and give them a shout out towards that. They get access to our exclusive citizen-only hangouts and early access to After Dark, which is about what we're going to do next. If you, again, are interested in becoming a citizen, please join us. We do this all the time, and we would love to have you with us. Head on over to patreon.com/TMRO or makersupport.com/TMRO. Again, your choice. Now, next week, I'm very excited to have back on again one of the hardest names that I have learned to pronounce. This is Dwight Stephen Boniecki, searching for Skylab. It's a Kickstarter campaign, as we always like to have. And see, there it is. Oh,
Wow.
So
what a
neat.
beautiful vehicle.
So cool. Anyway, so Dwight's going to be with us next week, so that'll be very exciting. And we just like to say thank you to all of you for joining us this week. If you are watching live, After Dark is up next, and if not, I guess we'll just see you then. Bye.